This is CBC Winnipeg News.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. A Manitoba woman who waited years for knee surgery is now dealing with the news she'll likely lose her leg because of post-surgery infection. She was left in the hospital with an open wound. Now she's scheduled to have her leg amputated. They're blaming the healthcare system and the surgeon who her husband says opened her leg without a plan to patch it up. The CBC's Ian Fraze has the details.
Roseanne Milburn used to live a full, active life. Now her husband fears that life is over, all because he says a surgeon started a procedure he couldn't finish.
The healthcare system failed my wife, and now because of that, she's going to lose her leg.
Dan Milburn bought his wife something he never expected.
I can't be here all day and night to help her.
He got a scooter because Roseanne's right leg could be amputated.
She's emotionally ruined.
Roseanne waited over 6 years for the knee surgery she finally got in October. But then she got an infection. In late November, a surgeon removed dead tissue from her knee. She got transferred to Concordia Hospital for a consultation and was supposed to return to HSC to get her leg stitched up quickly.
And that's when they found out that there was no beds at HSC.
Instead, she was at Concordia waiting for her leg to get stitched up for 8 days. Once at HSC, she had surgery for another infection. Then she got the bad news.
Because she had been waiting too long with an open wound, that the leg wasn't salvageable.
So you got it.
He's been to HSC to see his wife every day.
I'm in constant pain 24/7. It feels like my leg is on fire.
Shared Health couldn't say much due to privacy legislation, but in a statement it said she has various options to consider and she will be the one to guide the care team in her preferred care plan. But Roseanne feels she doesn't have a choice. She says doctors recommended the amputation.
If I want the infection gone, that's my only option, and the doctor told me that's my only option.
The health minister says they're sympathetic.
This is a situation we never want to hear a Manitoban go through.
But Roseanne is blaming the healthcare system for starting something it couldn't finish.
I'm tired of the healthcare system passing the buck. Tired of it. Be accountable.
Until then, she waits and wonders if she'll ever get her old life back. Ian Fraze, CBC News, Winnipeg.
The City of Winnipeg is backing away from a plan to replace its entire transit fleet with zero-emission buses. But city councillors say that might help the city reduce its carbon emissions faster. CBC's Cameron McLean reports.
In 2022, the city, province and Fed signed an agreement worth more than $275 million to supply Winnipeg Transit with new buses. Under the Investing in Canada infrastructure program, the city committed to buying 100 zero-emission buses, which would equal 15% of the city's fleet. Longer term, the city set the goal of replacing its entire fleet with zero-emission buses by 2045. But the city faces unprecedented financial pressures and a host of other expensive infrastructure projects. Public Works Chair Janice Luke says the goal of an all-electric bus fleet is too much for the city to do on its own.
Unless we have federal or provincial support to buy electrification buses, to buy electric buses and to do the whole electrification conversion, we cannot afford to convert our entire fleet.
After the end of the funding agreement in 2027, the city plans to purchase diesel buses. Luke says the city can buy more because diesel buses cost about half of electric ones.
Our goal is to get more people on the buses. If we get people out of vehicles and on the buses with excellent service, that will reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
St. Boniface councillor Matt Allard, a frequent advocate for climate action on council, says reducing the number of cars on the street will do more for the environment.
In terms of greenhouse gas emission footprint, 50% is private vehicle use. Of that, 30% is residential. And transit accounted for only 0.8%.
A funding shortage for a new garage has scaled back how many hydrogen or electric buses the city can buy. At an announcement at electric bus manufacturer New Flyer Industries in October, Premier Wab Kinew said the province is helping the city.
We committed in our budget this year that, there's a 4-year picture of what the operating funding for the City of Winnipeg is going to be.
The city still plans to set up electric charging stations and hydrogen infrastructure to support zero-emission buses. Cameron McLean, CBC News, Winnipeg.
The city's draft budget says it's looking at upping the threshold of snow that needs to fall before plows will hit residential streets for cleaning. But the idea is getting the cold shoulder from some. CBC's Gavin Axelrod reports.
Some Winnipeggers couldn't help but sigh or groan in frustration Wednesday when they heard about a snow clearing pilot project proposed in the first draft of the city's 2025 budget.
Just upset. Yeah, I'm not too happy about it.
The pilot would see if cost savings can be achieved by waiting for 15 centimeters of snow to fall on residential streets before plowing begins. Right now, the threshold to trigger snow clearing on residential streets is 10 centimeters. It would begin in the fall of 2025, running through the winter. But some Winnipeggers like Amanda Rose aren't sold on the plan.
I hope that enough Winnipeggers say, we don't want a pilot, we need you guys to plow the roads. We don't need to put the, for the car insurance and the roads and accidents, let's put the safety first.
Bike Winnipeg Executive Director Mark Coho says, even though the pilot applies to roads, it would still impact those trying to access transit when the sidewalk isn't a suitable pathway.
That catchment area disappears and that you're going to see subsequent drops for basically transit, but also for walking and biking in general.
Meanwhile, Winnipeg Mayor Scott Gillingham stressed that no permanent change has been made and says Winnipeggers should be patient.
We're going to run a pilot project. If it works, great, and the feedback comes back positive, then we'll look at the next steps of identifying maybe changes to the policy. If it doesn't, well, we'll have that information too.
Gillingham insists the pilot isn't a service cut and believes raising the threshold to trigger a residential plow could save the city millions of dollars. Gavin Axelrod, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A Winnipeg family is once again pushing for a Canada-wide alert system for missing seniors similar to an Amber Alert. The renewed call comes on the 1-year anniversary of the day their loved one disappeared. Earl Moberg was reported missing last December 12th. The 81-year-old has dementia and went missing on his first day of home care. Well, he's been presumed dead. His family wants to see a national silver alert system put in place that would target cell phones and broadcasts to notify the public when vulnerable seniors go missing. His daughter Britt says it would help save lives.
When a person with advanced dementia goes missing, as we know, the risks, if they're not found quickly, can lead to serious injury and death, even within 12 hours if they're not found. It's the statistics are really high on that.
Moberg was living at home, not a care facility, when he went missing, but his case has been deemed a critical incident by the WRHA. Zebra mussel larvae have been detected along the Assiniboine River at Brandon. This is the furthest west along this river the invasive species has been found in Manitoba. Provincial officials are now working on establishing a containment plan. The discovery comes after Parks Canada confirmed in September that zebra mussels have spread further in Clear Lake at Riding Mountain National Park. The mussels have already invaded the Red River, Lake Winnipeg, the Nelson River, Lake Manitoba, and other bodies of water in this province. Spring and weather specialist Riley Lachuk now. And Riley, oh my goodness, has it been a cold day? Another one.
Yeah, another chilly one, Brittany, and we are looking at temperatures again tonight, getting quite cold as we get into the overnight hours. So minus 24 in Winnipeg right now. We just saw this temperature go down to minus 30 in Brandon, but kind of a spread across southern Manitoba. Minus 18 in Victoria Beach, minus 28 in Thompson. Factoring in the wind, we are seeing those wind chill values dip closer or even colder than the minus 40 mark through parts of northern Manitoba, and that's where we've been kind of stuck today. So Dooley Lake, Brochet under an extreme cold warning, as is Fort Francis and really much of southern Manitoba. In northern Manitoba, we are looking at wind chill values overnight close to the minus 45 mark. That is frostbite on exposed skin in minutes. 5 minutes or less. So we're looking at some very cold conditions in the north. In southern Manitoba, again, we are looking at some very cold conditions once again tonight, dropping by late evening to -31 in Winnipeg. Mostly clear sky, wind chill -38, but we will start to shift the gears a little bit here slowly but surely turning that bus around, and we're going to start to see some temperatures actually warming up as we get through the overnight hours. So -27, mostly sunny first thing in the morning. Still a very cold wind chill because we'll start to see our winds picking up southeast 15 to 30, -17 by the afternoon, but south winds 30 gusting to 15. Brittany, this sets us up for a few windy days ahead, but as I mentioned, we're slowly but surely turning the wheel here back to more seasonal and above seasonal conditions for the weekend.
I know it's only been a couple days, but man, it feels like longer. Thank you, Riley.
You're welcome.
Well, you may want to save your dimes if you take the bus. Winnipeg transit fares are going up in the new year. Coming up, we'll speak to an expert about who will be impacted the most. Stay with us. Mounties in the province are dealing with a dramatic jump in homicides this year, making for a stressful time for the investigators working on the cases and those out of the field watching from the sidelines. The CBC's Gavin Axelrod has more.
3 different crime scenes and 5 family members lost. A tragedy in and around Carman, Manitoba. Months later in McCreary, 3 members of a Western Manitoba family killed in what Mounties called a horrific act of intimate partner violence. While the 2 incidents are separate and unrelated, they're part of a dramatic jump in homicides Manitoba RCMP are dealing with.
It's a very stressful time for not only our major crime services, but for the RCMP across Manitoba in general, because what you need to understand is the homicides are scattered throughout Manitoba.
As of Thursday, there's been 56 homicides in RCMP jurisdiction this year, up from 30 homicides and 3 suspicious deaths in all of 2023. Superintendent Rob Lassen is the officer in charge of the unit.
If we're fully staffed, we have approximately 36 investigators there, and then we have a special projects unit, which is roughly about 14 or 16, that take on the more complex long-term investigations. But right now, because of the numbers, we've combined both of those teams.
Bobby Baker is a 28-year RCMP member, working as a major crimes investigator, supervisor, and unit commander in the homicide and cold cases unit. So when he hears Mounties in the province's major crimes unit are being run off their feet, he knows exactly how they're feeling.
Working in homicide is a PTSD machine. It can wreck your personal life.
In his role with the organization that represents thousands of Mounties across Canada, Baker says what he hears from some in Manitoba major crime services is concerning.
This moment in time is just, it's kind of too much for our members.
Meanwhile, Lassen says the number of homicides this year is striking and hopes it's an anomaly and not something that becomes a trend. Gavin Axelrod, CBC News, Winnipeg.
If you rely on the bus for transportation, there are plans to increase Winnipeg Transit bus fares by 10 cents in the new year to $3.35 for adults. The 2025 city budget also calls for the hiring of 15 new community safety officers over 2 years to help improve safety on buses. Kyle Owens is the president of Functional Transit Winnipeg, a group advocating for better service and accessibility on the bus. He spoke with Marcy Marcusa on Information Radio.
The increase in the fares, you said it'll have an impact, a negative impact on people who are already feeling squeezed. Was it expected?
Well, certainly anyone who's paid for anything recently knows that costs are going up across the board for goods and services everywhere. It is kind of an awkward increase going from $3.25 to $3.35. Nobody really carries dimes anymore, or at least I don't. I think you're effectively going to see the cost go up quite a bit more. It's going to be, people carry quarters and loonies. It's much more likely to be $3.50, $4 is going to effectively be what people are paying, because that's the change that they have on them. The other issue is that you're going to find people who just don't have that extra quarter, and the driver is going to have to make a call on whether or not to accept that fare. And that isn't great, because the single greatest source of disputes and confrontations on buses are fare disputes. It puts those drivers in an awkward position.
I want to ask you about the community safety officers to ride the bus. So there is more money in this budget for that. I mentioned 15 officers. Some critics say, though, that the work is not yet proven, though, that this is actually helping with safety on buses. Haven't had enough time to sort of analyze it and have data to support that it works. What do you think of spending more money on those positions before we quantifiably know that they're helping?
That is a complicated issue. Certainly, Winnipeg Transit is a foundational service in terms of city services. So many people, tens of thousands of people, are out there right now on a bus using those services and have a completely positive, normal, uneventful experience. We don't talk about the fact that for 99% of people who use transit, that is a non-event. When there are disruptions, when there are concerns about people feeling safe or security, then that is news, and that is worth talking about. And certainly the community safety officers seem to be an attempt to address people's concerns. It is, I agree, early days. Security is very complicated. Feelings of safety can be assuaged, can be helped by having the sense that there are more people out there helping manage situations. But security can also be zero-sum. There are some people who can feel that the additional presence of security can make them feel safe. And it's important to talk about how to address their concerns as well. And I think that we have seen community safety officers use that language of approaching people carefully and with consideration, of learning how to de-escalate. That is crucial, but these are still, as you said, early days of the program.
And Riley, when it's this cold out, you feel for the people that are sitting outside or standing outside waiting for those buses to come that don't always run on time.
Yes.
And as we've been saying, I feel like a broken record, and I'm sure you do too. It is cold, and we know it's Winnipeg, but I think so many of us just haven't felt prepared because we've really been spoiled the past little while.
As I mentioned, we're slowly going to start turning that bus around back toward more seasonal and actually above seasonal conditions. We'll get there. We'll get there. Just tough it out for another day. I have a picture I want to show you, and this basically sums up the past couple of mornings we've had. Roxanne sent this in, a lovely shot of the city's skyline. You can see some of that haze, the sun. It looks cold when you look at a picture like this. So thanks, Roxanne, for sending this in. If you didn't go outside, well, this picture kind of sums it up for you. You can always send your pictures to talkback@cbc.ca. So still mainly clear skies across much of the province, really through southern and up the western side of the province. We have started to see a little bit of cloud through parts of the Interlake where we have seen a little bit of warmer temperatures today, and a few flurries along the Hudson Bay coast as expected. And some of those warm temperatures into northwestern Ontario, because we've had this cloud cover here as a bit of a blanket throughout the day today, keeping what heat is left kind of locked in there. So through the overnight hours, mainly clear again tonight. That's really going to allow our temperatures to sink, but watch, because our winds start to shift out of the south here, and they'll start to pick up as we get into the day on Friday. So ushering in some warmer southerly air, and this is going to start to warm our temperatures back up as we get into the weekend. Bit of cloud starts to build in on Saturday, so I'm calling it a mix of sun and clouds throughout the day. Could see a few residual flurries along the Hudson Bay coast as we get into the early part of Saturday. Then we start to bring in a little bit more cloud cover as we get into Sunday, and a little bit more snow even into northern Manitoba. Not talking much in the way of accumulation, but certainly could see a dusting of snow through the weekend into early Sunday for parts of northern Manitoba. And this here in the bottom left of your screen is what will be our next weather maker potentially come Sunday into Monday. So we'll keep our eye on that. Could see a little bit of snow through parts of southern Manitoba. Into Friday, what we will notice certainly will be that shift in winds as we get through the day. So winds 30 gusting 50, could even see some gusts in the Red River Valley up to that 60 plus as we get through the day. So we are looking at a bit of a windier day as we get through the day tomorrow. And that wind, that southerly wind, sticks around. It also helps to drive our temperatures up. So first thing in the morning, minus 22 in Brandon, minus 27 in Winnipeg. You can start to see that warmer air starting to make its way in to western Manitoba, up to minus 17 tomorrow, minus 7, minus 3 for Saturday and Sunday in Brittany. We start to get back into a more of a reality check as we get into Monday and Tuesday. So things are changing. We'll start to get into some warmer air soon.
I like the looks of Sunday.
Yes.
Thank you, Riley.
You're welcome.
Well, there is much more to come after the break. You're watching CBC Winnipeg News. Stay with us. Ottawa is preparing to release details about its billion-dollar border plan in the coming days. Premiers across the country got an early heads-up Wednesday during a call with the Prime Minister. Some want a tougher approach with the U.S., but as Olivia Stefanovich reports, not all premiers agree on that.
Canada is full of natural resources Americans may no longer be able to rely on. If Donald Trump moves forward with his threat to impose a 25% tax on all Canadian goods.
We power 1.5 million homes, and if they put on tariffs, it's going to be unaffordable for Americans to buy electricity.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford doubling down on a counter threat he made in last night's call between the premiers and the Prime Minister.
We're going to use every tool in our toolbox to defend Ontarians and Canadians across the border.
Well, that's okay if he does that, that's fine.
Critical minerals, metals, and forestry products may also become part of the retaliation strategy.
The U.S. is trying to build homes for Americans, but they need our 2x4s to do so.
But premiers are divided about how hard to punch back.
Under no circumstances will Alberta agree to cut off oil and gas exports.
Alberta Premier Danielle Smith says she prefers a diplomatic approach, and she's not alone.
We hope it is just bluster. We're preparing as if it is not. There will be no winners in a trade war.
I had the chance to meet with Mr. Trump last weekend in Paris, and he told me very clearly that we can avoid those tariffs if we do what needs to be done with the borders.
The U.S. president-elect wants Canada to stop the flow of fentanyl and illegal migrants crossing the border. The federal government shared details about its plan to address Trump's concerns, said by sources to cost more than $1 billion, during their call yesterday with premiers.
We were encouraged by their desire to contribute provincial personnel, provincial assets to this work.
Alberta released its own plan today to strengthen its border with Montana. Other provinces are expected to follow. As for the federal government's border strategy, well, the public safety minister says it will be released to the Trump administration in the coming days and the Canadian public. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Ottawa.
Meantime, Manitoba's premier says his government is preparing a list of potential retaliatory measures. Wab Kinew wouldn't reveal details, but says he takes the threats from Trump seriously. Kinew has also promised to beef up border security. One idea involves RCMP officers patrolling during overtime shifts. He's hoping it's an interim measure before Ottawa deploys a dedicated unit to the border.
It is clear that we are going to need to have a response when Trump takes office, and so that's why we are considering perhaps other steps like using overtime to get us until there is a more robust response from the federal government.
Kinew previously talked about putting conservation officers along the border. Ontario is taking aim at encampments. The economic woes of the pandemic and after saw them spring up in public parks. And the Premier wants them to come down and not spring up again. The CBC's Ithil Musa reports.
It's scenes like this that Ontario's Premier wants to crack down on.
Enough is enough. This has to stop.
Flanked by mayors from across Ontario, Doug Ford announced the details of new legislation aimed at stiffening penalties for trespassing and public drug use and at dismantling homeless encampments for good.
These encampments are taking over public spaces, with illegal drug use happening out in the open, creating huge safety risks for people and communities.
The new bill will allow police to ticket people using illegal drugs in public, with penalties of up to $10,000 or 6 months in jail.
What he's proposing is really a window dressing on what is effectively a very enforcement-led, very heavy-handed approach. People will leave the encampments and they'll go into alleyways, they'll go into the woods, they'll go into bank vestibules, they'll go into unused garages, they'll go to places that are unsafe for them. And that doesn't solve the underlying problem.
Homelessness and encampments have risen dramatically in Ontario under Ford, and shelters throughout the province are full. Ontario says it's dedicating an additional $75.5 million to expand shelter spaces and build more affordable housing. But advocates say
it's a pittance. It is not enough for an entire province, let alone for one mid-sized municipality. If we're going to put in harsher punishments without building shelter and housing, the only default place for people to go is jails.
Until we come back.
Ontario's Liberal leader calls the new bill highly punitive and says it amounts to criminalizing homeless people.
If they were committed to doing something, anything, they would have done it before today.
Ford says he's willing to use the notwithstanding clause to override the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms if courts interfere in municipalities' use of the new provisions to clear encampments. Ivil Musa, CBC News, Toronto.
Here at home, homelessness advocate Marion Willis is concerned about that plan. She says it's too harsh and doesn't address the real problem.
We need to be solutions and recovery focused, taking punitive, sort of very right-wing actions like those that Ford is suggesting is cruel and it's ridiculous, quite frankly.
Willis says a new national addiction strategy is needed to address root causes of homelessness. In Winnipeg, the city only evicts encampments that are on private property or are causing an immediate risk to safety. CBC News has learned the federal government has closed a major loophole in its gun buyback program. As Jonathan Gatehouse reports, parts that could be used to make homemade firearms will now be included.
Yeah, so if you look at this wall here, this room in West Winkle's gun shop has become a sort of museum. Stacks of assault weapons still in their boxes, collecting dust. Paid inventory banned from sale for almost 5 years. But even as the federal government prepares to finally start buying back those guns, there's a new development: the quiet addition of assault weapon parts to the program.
Kind of joke called the Mr. Potato Head of guns because there's so many plug-and-play parts that are involved in it. So if you don't encompass all the parts, really there's no public safety enhancement that you could ever argue.
To restrict access to the very weapons used to commit these horrible crimes.
At a news conference about the buyback plans last Thursday, parts were never mentioned. Now, CBC News has learned the government has since quietly updated its website with a list of components it will be paying for, including bolts, magazines, sights, and grips, along with a wide assortment of barrels.
I think the cost of the program is going to go up dramatically with the inclusion of parts, but also trying to catalog and get these firearms destroyed. I do expect the administration to be quite expensive.
Back in 2021, the Parliamentary Budget Officer estimated the cost of the buyback at $756 million plus administration, a figure that was already sure to rise as the list of banned weapons has grown. And that estimate never included parts. Gage Hobrick has been tracking the assault weapons ban for the Canadian Taxpayers Federation.
You talk to any firearm owner, they'll probably have just as many firearms accessories as they do have firearms, especially for some of these really expensive guns that are going to be on this buyback list. So all it's going to do is add very much increased cost to taxpayers.
Just how much remains to be seen. Last week, public safety officials said they're still working out the new price tag. A CBC News request to interview Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc about the changes was declined. But even as the expanded buyback finally gets underway, its future is in doubt. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has vowed to cancel what he calls a gun grab if his party wins the next election. Jonathan Gatehouse, CBC News, Toronto.
Recent data shows that most of the RSV infections have been among babies 1 year and under. A Health Canada approved immunization has been seen to dramatically cut the risk of hospitalization. Mike Crawley looks at why that protection remains out of reach for many infants in the country.
Welcome to the RSV clinic.
A clinic to immunize babies against respiratory syncytial virus, or RSV.
Oh, love. Okay.
Some 3,000 Canadian children are hospitalized annually with lung infections resulting from RSV, most of them infants.
Those with more severe disease may have things like wheezing, some difficulty breathing. They may look distressed or incredibly tired.
Now there's a new shot against RSV, approved by Health Canada and recommended by the National Advisory Committee on Immunization for all infants.
I'm very grateful that he is protected and that it's covered by the government.
However, only Ontario, Quebec, and the 3 territories are offering it to all newborns. In the rest of the country, except for the highest risk babies, parents don't get the option.
I wish we had this as well, this opportunity to give her the injection so she would have that same protection as other babies in other areas in Canada.
Why the disparity? The other 8 provinces could not reach a pricing deal with the company that makes the RSV shot. Its Canadian list price is more than $950 per dose. One reason why the RSV shot costs that much? It's a monoclonal antibody. So unlike a vaccine, it protects against disease immediately.
That is particularly useful in the scenario of RSV, where we know that the risk is greatest during those first few months of life.
In a statement, drug maker Sanofi says it continues to work with all provinces and territories to facilitate access to the shot for all Canadian babies for 2025 and beyond. Data from Europe and the US suggests the shot reduces infant hospitalizations from RSV by more than 80%. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Toronto.
It's the only full-time Air Force band in Canada, and it's here in Winnipeg. After the break, we'll have more on their big performance and who it's helping. Stay with us. Most provinces, including Manitoba, continue to struggle with full animal shelters. The Toronto Humane Society says abandoned pets is a heartbreaking consequence of the affordability crisis hitting Canadians across the country. Now it's putting One Dog Story front and centre for charity in hopes of preventing more dogs from being left out in the cold. The CBC's Tyreek Reed has the story.
She's a pretty healthy, happy 4-month-old puppy at this point.
French bulldog Clementine is doing much better than she was when she was brought into the Toronto Humane Society in October. Clementine was left in a chip box in a Toronto park at just 8 weeks old. A crowd of onlookers found her bleeding until eventually someone jumped into action and took her to the shelter.
When she came in, our team were able to quickly realize that she had an emergency situation called a rectal prolapse. And so she needed surgery. It was really the only solution. And so thankfully, we were able to get the medical team responding really quickly.
She says if Clementine hadn't received timely treatment, she would have suffered life-threatening complications. Since her recovery, Clementine's been adopted into a new home. The Humane Society suspects Clementine was abandoned because her previous owners could no longer afford to care for her, something they say is becoming more common.
The rising costs of living are making it impossible for people to choose between their finances and emergency or care for their pets, and we want to help.
That help comes in the form of a new Keep Pets in the Picture campaign being launched by the Humane Society. It aims to raise money to assist those who are financially struggling to care for their pets, while encouraging owners to seek help if they need it.
We're talking about animal pet parents, we're talking about families, we want them to stay together.
Other animal shelters say they've also noticed an increase in abandoned pets and intake numbers.
I have over 1,500 requests just for 2024. Last year it was, I think 800 or 900. So we're seeing, an upward climb.
She says it's not only the cost of living that's contributing to the issue.
We don't have enough adopters. We don't have enough fosters. There are not enough rescues and shelters that can intake these pets.
The Humane Society is encouraging people to consider fostering a pet to ensure animals like Clementine always have a home. Tyreek Reed, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, the good news there is that little Clementine looks happy and healthy and warm inside. She was sitting there in a little bed. Good spot for those pets to stay tomorrow.
Yes.
Probably want to avoid that outside walk or one that's too long, for sure.
It's going to be a quick in, quick out pee in the morning.
Stay in bed. That's where I'd like to be.
Let's have a look at your dog walking forecast for Friday. Another very cold one for Duffy first thing in the morning. Thank you, Linda, for sending this picture in. You can send yours to talkback@cbc.ca. Yes, if you're heading out, the booties, the coat, the whole 9 yards. Again, tomorrow morning, we're looking at a wake-up temperature in Winnipeg around -27. That wind chill making it feel closer to -38 into the early morning hours. So this is frostbite on exposed skin in about 10 minutes at factors like these. -17 by the afternoon. Notice our winds start to pick up through the afternoon hours. South 30 gusting to 50. Could see some gusts even higher into parts of southern Manitoba as we get into the evening hours tomorrow night as well. Upper level atmosphere. So we have had this real deep Arctic ridge that is built over Manitoba, now encompassing much of the U.S. Midwest, Ontario into Quebec. Much of the country getting a taste of cold temperatures, below seasonal temperatures at this time of the year. You'll notice, though, as we get into Friday, we start to see our pattern shifting a bit here with the introduction of some of those south winds that will warm our temperatures up for the weekend. But then things start to slump again as we get Monday into Tuesday, reintroducing some of that colder air as we get into the early to middle part of next week. So we are looking at a return in the long range of some of those below seasonal temperatures as we get into next week. Mostly clear across the province tonight. That will allow temperatures to really slip once again into the -30s for Brandon, for Verdun, Winnipeg, right around the Winnipeg region, looking at temperatures dipping close to or below -30 overnight tonight. -34 in Lynn Lake, -32 in Thompson, around -30 through Flin Flon, the Pas, Ocean into Grand Rapids. Could see a few flurries through Tuduli Lake, across to Churchill, even toward Gillam as we get through the afternoon hours. Tomorrow tomorrow, looking at -16 in Thompson by the afternoon hours. Into southern Manitoba, again, another cold start. However, we will start to see our temperatures warming up through the overnight hours. So early morning temperatures, maybe not all that bad, but still on the cold side as you factor in some of the wind as we get through the day tomorrow. So -14s by lunchtime for Brandon, for Verdon, -13 in Melita, -17s by the lunch hour. We'll kind of ebb and flow our temperature as we get through the afternoon hours through the Red River Valley. -15 in Peguis by the afternoon, -13s, -14s, Brittany, through northwestern Ontario. I'll have more in your 7-day forecast when I come back.
Booties for the dogs, long underwear for everyone else.
Yes, absolutely. Tuke and mitts.
Thanks, Riley.
You're welcome.
Well, you may have heard performances by the Royal Canadian Air Force Band, particularly at Remembrance Day ceremonies. But for their next performance, those bagpipes are being put away. A holiday concert in support of United Way is taking place tomorrow night. Well, the free show is now sold out. People will still be able to watch on a Facebook live stream. CBC Manitoba community reporter Shannalee Vidal stopped by a rehearsal earlier this week.
The Royal Canadian Air Force Band is inviting you home for the holidays. The free holiday concert in Winnipeg is a fundraiser for the United Way. I stopped by a rehearsal ahead of the big show.
Half note equals dotted half note there. From the top.
The repertoire we're playing for the concert is really fun, lots of diversity. We have, of course, some music from some favorite holiday movies like Frozen and Home Alone. We've got some traditional carols, some jazzy carols, but then, of course, it's a holiday concert. We have to have some Michael Bublé and Mariah Carey.
We are the only full-time Air Force band in the country. We're made up of about 30 full-time professional musicians. We've had a lot of new people this year. We have about 8 or 9 new members of the band this year, which is exciting. So it's their first Christmas concert.
It's been exciting being posted here and getting to play with this wonderful ensemble and at the same time experience this new city.
It's honestly one of my favorite concerts of the whole calendar for us. We do so many different types of events and perform all around the city and the world even, but to play this concert every year is really special for me. We will be doing a live stream of the concert. It's going to be available on the Royal Canadian Air Force Facebook page.
I know my family back home are going to be tuning in on the live stream, so the fact that we can reach such a wide audience is really exciting.
I think a lot of people have kind of heard of us but don't know that much about us. So hopefully they realize how good I think we are. I think we are pretty good.
We have members in the band who play multiple instruments. We have lots of people who can sing as well as play. So the band is like really multifaceted and just a pleasure to play with. Yeah, and also the people themselves are so wonderful, so nice. And so, yeah, I feel like I've joined a really lovely family.
Tickets are sold out for the shows, but you can stream it online at the Royal Canadian Air Force Facebook page, and donations are being accepted for the United Way. For CBC Manitoba, I'm Shannalee Vidal.
63 outstanding Canadians received one of the country's highest honours today, the Order of Canada, including 3 people from Manitoba.
Stephen Alfred Bell.
Stephen Alfred Bell.
Musician Steve Bell has been playing for 40 years. In that time, he's won 2 Junos for Christian Gospel Album of the Year. 2 other Manitobans were celebrated today, including a residential school survivor. The medal recognizes Canadians who've enriched the country through their extraordinary and varied contributions. Still ahead, a very special delivery. Santa comes early from some children in Nunavut. That story, plus Riley's back with your 7-day forecast. We're back right after this.
Well, let's have a look at your 7-day forecast now. So again, another bright day tomorrow. Watch for those south winds, 30 gusting to 50. Could see some gusts higher through parts of the Red River Valley. Tomorrow, we start to mix in some cloud as we get Saturday into Sunday, but the trade-off is we get some warmer conditions. So -7 for a high on Saturday, climbing up to -3 for Sunday. With that cloud cover comes a good chance we could see some flurries. Slight chance overnight Sunday, but I think the best chance we have is into the day on Monday. Our temperature starts at -2 on Monday, falls to -10, and then we're at -12s for Tuesday and Wednesday. Get a mix of sun and clouds as we get toward the end of next week. Well, Santa has come early for kids in Iqaluit, but his sleigh looks a little bit different this year.
A Canadian Forces Hercules touched down in the northern community with toys for children living in the remote capital. That's today's Daily Lift.
Under the cover of darkness, a Hercules C-130 plane rolled into Iqaluit's RCMP hangar on Friday. Stashed inside were pallets full of covered goods. The operation, the 14th Toys for the North campaign.
We've got members and their spouses and their children and some of their friends that from the community. We all come together and spend the weekend sorting, wrapping.
They've teamed up with the Canadian Toy Association to collect the toys and the Royal Canadian Air Force to bring them to the north. This year, Coral Harbour, Clyde River, Chesterfield Inlet and Sunny Kilowak are getting the donations. This officer was previously stationed in Sunny Kilowak.
In the last few years, the community's dealt with quite a lot, so I think this is going to bring a little bit of happiness over the Christmas holidays.
They've put together 2,000 parcels worth of toys now, which is quite a big task, but fret not, the big man in red was on hand to help, though he was a bit coy about what he has in his sleigh.
And now with all these toys wrapped up and on their way, the countdown begins for the day we can finally rip open all these presents. Samuel Watt, CBC News, Iqaluit.
That's a very different sleigh this year for Santa.
Quite the upgrade this year. Betty can go a lot faster with that.
I was just going to say, and it holds, well, it might not hold more because that's
Yeah.
a very magical Santa sack that he has around the world that he pulls those presents out of.
And he's getting an early start this year.
But it definitely keeps him warmer, I would bet, than the
I think
sleigh.
so. Yeah.
Hope you all stay warm tonight, stay inside. We'll see you back here tomorrow night.
See ya.